Well, welcome back. We call this the midweek Bible study, but according to what we hear from you and the way we see the numbers on the different social media sites where this is viewed, you watch it anytime you want to watch it. So welcome to the Whenever During the Week Bible class. I'm on my own. Rick Hunter sends his best to you. He has, originally there were some issues with job and then illness. And so we're just going to let him rest and heal for a while. He'll be back when he can be back. And you may see him actually on Sundays long before you see him on a Wednesday. And the reason is we're right now recording for March. And yet this is in February. So we're weeks ahead in recording. And we do that because I have to hit the road a lot to come see you. Welcome home tour. If you've got 3 or 5 people in your home church or your family, and you would like for me to come by and see you, whether you're in New Mexico or New Hampshire, you let me know. And if it's overseas, we try to work on that too. I'm scheduled to go this year overseas to Africa and also to Israel and Jordan, and maybe back to the United Kingdom. We're trying to fit that in as well. So that means we have to record early. If you're ready to get studying, let's get into it in Mark chapter 13. And we had to break off in the middle of a really important sermon. Jesus gave 2 really important discourses on the same place in Olivet, or the Mount of Olives. One was the Sermon on the Mount, and that's very well known. The other is not as well known unless you're at a church which is all about prophecy, in which case they have probably beaten this one half to death and misused it, just to be very frank. The best way to understand what's going on in Mark 13 is to read Matthew 23 and 24. That's called the Olivet Discourse, to set it aside from the Sermon on the Mount. One given at the first of Jesus's earthly ministry, and the other near the end, very near the end. The Olivet Discourse starts with 2 questions, and it's so important that we understand that they heard 2 questions, and that 2 questions were answered, and that we do not conflate the 2. The apostles are very proud of the work that has been done to rehab the temple. The temple had fallen into a shambles. And if you read the history of Jerusalem, you know that it has been built and rebuilt so many times through history. Those stones have been used a lot. But Herod had been doing this very long-term and rather expensive rehab of the temple. And it undoubtedly did look very beautiful. Was it like Solomon's temple? No, but nobody had a picture of that one. They couldn't remember that one. This one looked fantastic. And so the apostles were proud of this, and they pointed to Jesus at the beginning of Mark 13, but also at the Olivet Discourse in Matthew, which is far longer, far more complete, and saying, have a look at this. Isn't this an amazing thing? And Jesus, knowing he's about to die very soon, is trying to get them to understand what's coming. And he says, you see these big stones. There will come a day soon where there will not be one of these stones stacked upon another. And that just reeled them. And they spoke amongst themselves for a while, and then they came to him, and they said, well, when's that going to happen? What kind of signs to prepare us that that's about to happen here? And when are the signs of the end of the age? Some versions will say the end of the world. The word really does mean the era, and it could be an eon. It could be a long period, but the end of all things as we know them. When will that come? So 2 questions. Jesus is answering the first question. And in Mark, it is very condensed. He goes, there's going to be earthquakes, there's going to be wars, there's going to be rumors of wars. There are going to be people saying, Jesus is out here, Jesus is over there, run to, we have seen Jesus, we found Jesus. He says, listen to none of that. That's not the end of the era. That's not the end of all things. That's the end, coming around the end of the temple. But don't believe them when they say that I'm there and I'm there and I'm there. In fact, in verse 10 of Mark 13, he says, the gospel's got to go out first. before the second thing happens. It's got to move among the people. You will be arrested, he tells them. You'll be brought to trial, but don't worry about it. The Holy Spirit will give you what you need to say in a moment. So now we start right in the middle of all of this in verse 12 of Mark 13. Brother will betray brother to death, a father his child. Children will rebel against their parents and have them put to death. Everyone will hate you because of me, but the one who stands firm to the end will be saved. This was going to be about the end of the temple era, the end of the old Jewish system. But God is not throwing away the Jews, nor is he throwing away all that preparation he had done, teaching them about morality, giving commandments and such. Those are not being burned somewhere. They're not going to go down in rubble as the temple goes down. No, but there's a difference now. Jesus has entered the world. And because he's entered the world, there is now this new era, and it's the Jesus era. The Jews are absolutely engaged and involved. However, early on, infighting between the Jewish Christians and the Gentile Christians would help the Romans split everything apart. And we cannot blame entirely the Romans. You absolutely can't entirely blame the Jews or the Christians. Everybody had a hand in this. And because of this, it all goes apart. And eventually, not long after this, there's going to be one wall left of that temple. And that's the wall that we call the Wailing Wall today, where Jewish people go to pray for restoration of the temple and also of themselves as the nation of God. Many of them do so in a secular way. Let's not get into that, all right? Brother will betray each other. This is awful. But you do that. Religious things divide people. Political things divide people. For the last, I don't know, maybe 6 to 8 years in my memory is the first I've ever seen where different political parties will put out, all right, it's coming up to Thanksgiving or Christmas or New Year's or whatever. Here's a list of things to say when your parents or your kids say this. And I know of people whose families split up over their reaction to COVID. I know of people who split up over reaction to the last several elections, and they don't even talk to each other. But we live in America, in a country where most of the time you're not going to be put in jail or killed for it. They did not. And therefore, these things would end in death for many families. Everyone will hate you because of me. That sounds awful, doesn't it? But is it still not true? Now, not in some safe areas, but for an example, recently in Britain, a man who's very well known, philosopher and political commentator, had to write a book on, I'm a Christian and I'm okay. You can trust me. You can trust Christians, because even in the United Kingdom, being a Christian is looked upon as untrustworthy, unsmart, ill-educated. And it's becoming more and more so here. And you will find it happening all over the world, except in some areas that are still poorer areas where people receive him gladly. What is it about Jesus that offends people? A lot. But think of John chapter 14, where he says, I am the way, the truth, the life. No man comes to the Father but by me. That exclusivity the world hates. It demands a false diversity. It demands that you accept all diversity if it's the diversity they like. I was disinvited. I had been invited to speak at a major secular university, a state university in the Northeast of the United States, on Christians and diversity and how we can work together with people with different viewpoints. And they had other speakers up. And about a month and a half before I was supposed to go, they called me and they said, we found out that you don't accept this and that so we're disinviting you. In other words, they wanted diversity, but not my diversity. They didn't want anybody to be diverse from their diversity. And therefore, in the name of inclusion of all, they have to exclude a lot because of Jesus. He's too exclusive for them. Well, all they did was disinvite me. I missed sitting in airports for a while and receiving a small check. Okay. A lot of people have lost their lives. In Nigeria, in the last year, over 8,000 Christians have been killed, kidnapped, and raped. And it doesn't even make the newspapers over here. It is an amazing, untold story. They are hated, considered lesser because they are Christian. That happens a lot in this world. Then, second question. That's all about Romans are coming in. The end of the world's coming. Romans are coming in. He's still going to talk about this in verse 14. When you see the abomination, it causes desolation. What in the world are we talking about here? It's a referral back to the book of Daniel. Daniel's chapter 9, 11, and 12. Now, Daniel, the first half of Daniel, are amazing stories, easy to understand. Even though they are mind-blowing, they're easy to understand. And then it becomes entirely apocryphal language. The word apocryphal means hidden, and it absolutely is. The Jewish people loved that kind of literature. They've got a lot of it. In the Bible, you've got Ezekiel, you've got a little bit in Isaiah, you've got Zechariah, you've got Daniel. But you also, in the other books that they had Esdras, 1st and 2nd and 3rd and 4th Esdras. You had the book of Enoch that had several different books becoming more and more apocryphal. They loved that kind of literature, although to most of us, and I would even say most of the people at the time that were reading it, it's very obtuse. What are we talking about? So it's very hard to go to Daniel and do what people do with Daniel and say, this means the United Nations, and this means Cobra helicopters, and this means, and I'm serious, I've read the books. This means that. It's really not that easy to do. But Daniel did talk about, but through a revelation given to him by God, whoever put together that last half of the book, the abomination of desolation, or the abomination that causes desolation. Jesus in the book of Matthew will even say, where the eagles gather, that's where the corpses are going to be. Well, to the Jews, what the Romans had done or would do to the temple and what they had done to the Jewish system was an abomination. And what was their standard? It was a big eagle. And they would come in carrying these standards and then wipe out people, as the Celtic leader who was defeated said, you make a desert, but you call it peace. They just destroy what they have. And in 70 AD, a general named Titus, not the Titus of Bible, this is a Roman general, entered Jerusalem with the standard of eagles and tore apart the temple and really destroyed the entire Jewish system. There are Jews today that can tell you what tribe kind of their line used to be from if they're Levites. The name Cohen is a good sign that somewhere down the line they were Levites. But most of the other tribes, they have no ability at all to tell you, because the records were destroyed and the people were scattered, and over 2,000 years things are lost. So this abomination, standing where it does not belong, it comes into the holy temple precincts. Let the reader understand. Then those who are in Judea, let them flee to the mountains. Let no one on the housetop go down and enter the house to take anything out. You don't got time. You see that, run. Let no one in the field go back to get their cloak. How dreadful it will be in those days for pregnant women and nursing mothers. Jesus always had a sincere, deep, and public interest in the welfare of women. Let no one go back to see. Pray that this will not take place in winter. If you don't know this, winter is cold. Winter is cold in the Middle East. We always think of it as desert. Well, even desert is freezing cold at night, even in summer. They do get snow in Israel. You do get snow in Syria and Iraq. The weather can be very bad, so he's prayed that it not be then, because those will be days of distress, unequaled from the beginning when God created the world until now, and never to be equaled again. Well, hang on. Were more people killed at the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD than killed by the Nazis in the prison camps? No. Were more people killed than killed by Stalin? No. He's probably still the world leader in killing his own people. What about by Pol Pot or Saros, as he's also known? No. So what is he talking? It's not talking about numbers of people. It's talking about effect. The entire Jewish nation, as the people of God centered around Jerusalem, comes to an end. Now, there is a nation of Israel today, the only democracy in the area, and therefore I support its existence 100%. I can't tell you I support all of its politics because I don't know the politics, but I support an existence of democracy there and their right as a people to exist and to have their own nation. That's not the same thing that was there before 70 AD. There are more Jewish people in the state of New York than there are in Israel, I'm told. I haven't done the math, but this is what I hear from very reliable sources that track this, who are Jews and Israelis. So what's the thing here? This is the great diaspora, the spreading, the forced spreading of God's people. If you've ever wondered, maybe you watched Fiddler on the Roof or something and wondered, how did Jews end up in Russia? Or you've seen how did Jews get into, the Sephardic and Ashkenazi Jews, and how did they get into Spain? They were forced. And then when they make homes, like in Britain, all of a sudden the king says, we're taking all the property and killing all the Jews and driving them out of the nation. It happened time after time after time. And so for 2,000 years, they've been dispossessed. And now they have that little sliver of land. And Golda Meir, their first prime minister, I'll never forget her comment that went something like, Moses spent 40 years in the wilderness leading the Israelites to the only place in the Middle East that didn't have oil. That's that little sliver of land, and it's tiny. That's now where they are, but they were dispossessed for so very long. So it was a great tragedy. And look at all of the pain it unleashed for literally 2,000 years. Some could argue, I would, that the pain has not ended because they are surrounded by threats. And politicians argue about whether they should be there at all. And there are even some countries where maps do not include Israel on the map. It's rather amazing. So yes, this was something the world had not seen before and hasn't seen again. If the Lord had not cut short those days, the time of the destruction of Jerusalem, no one would survive. But for the sake of the elect, whom he has chosen, he has shortened them. So did he choose just a few people to survive? Calvinists often leap upon the word elect to indicate that God had pre-chosen some people to survive and others not to. I do not believe that that's what's going on here at all. I'm not a Calvinist, but that doesn't mean I automatically don't think. I don't think because of the context. I think it's talking about the Jewish people as a people. If God had not shortened those days by overthrowing the Roman government repeatedly, one emperor after another emperor, the whole area gets confused about who's the enemy. During this period, the Jewish people can travel and survive. And in some places, for a while, even thrive. Then he goes, at that time, verse 21, if anyone says to you, look, here's the Messiah, or look, there he is, do not believe it. People still do that today. For false messiahs and false prophets will appear and perform signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. This is for them. But even in modern days, Sun Myung Moon, the founder of the Unification Church, claims to be Christ. We had a man who claimed to be the re-embodiment of Christ take people into Guyana, an American take people into Guyana and convince them to take poison and kill themselves. You will find this repeatedly, people looking for the new Christ. The Muslims do the same, always looking for the 12th Imam, looking for him to come to signal the end of the world. He goes, don't do this. Be on your guard. I've told you everything ahead of time. But in those days following that distress, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, the stars will fall from the sky, and the heavenly bodies will be shaken. Now, don't read this literally, because they don't read it literally. To us, this indicates the end of the universe. And so a lot of people think this is all about the end of the world. It isn't. It's about the end of Jerusalem and the end of the Jewish people as a settled people there, the chosen of God, one community. They are now going to be scattered, and they remain scattered to this day. So what about the sun and the moon? That's a Semitic way, and particularly a very Jewish way of saying our leaders will not give leadership. We will not receive guidance, stars, sun, moon. There will not be light. You won't know what is the best thing for me to do to protect my family. What is God doing? That's not going to be discernible during this time. It's going to go dark. Now, the people that read this knew about dark times because if you remember from Malachi to Matthew, we're just using those because they're last book, first book. There were 400 years where there were a lot of writing of books done, and there were a lot of collating of the Holy Scriptures. But there weren't prophets like Samuel and Isaiah going around. There weren't the great evangelists like John the Baptist and such going about. So sometimes we call that the 400 years of silence. Wasn't totally silent, but it's all right. It's going to hit again. And so they understand this. Don't look to the government to take care of you. Don't look to your religious leaders to take care of you. This is going to be a dark time. And at that time, the people will see the Son of Man coming in clouds with power and glory. Now, that's the way we usually read it. So we naturally attach it to verse 25. He's answering the second question. This is more obvious when you read out of Matthew than it is out of Mark. But once you read out of Matthew, then you can see that at that time, he's moving on to the second question. You'll see the Son of Man coming in the clouds with great power and glory. He'll send his angels and gather his elect from the four winds, from the ends of the earth to the ends of the heavens. Stop. I read recently a book by an atheist, and he talked about the Bible and how it did not understand cosmology. The Bible is not a book of cosmology. It's not a book of science. It's not a book of history. It's a narrative about man and God. But still, he claimed that the four ends of the earth meant that they believed that the earth was flat. Are you aware that a lot of people knew the earth was a circle or a sphere before Columbus? I was always told Columbus figured that out when he sailed and didn't fall off an edge. No. Even back around Plato, Aristotle, and that's way back before Jesus. They had figured this out. They'd watch ships sail off, and they noticed the bottom of the ship went out of sight before the top of it. And they're going, wait a minute. And they were able to figure out these things by doing math, and they were really good at it, too. It's amazing to me. Einstein came up with one of the key parts of his theory of relativity by noticing the motion while he was in a lift, an elevator. I'm going, what am I paying attention to when I'm in an elevator? I receive very few great scientific hurrahs, but these people watching ships were able to then start doing, all right, the time, the distance, math, and figure out the circumference of the world, not too off. It's just astounding. Anyway, no, God is using language the way we use language. We talk about, did you see the sunrise today? And if you say yes, we don't go, liar, suns don't rise. We know that. We know Earth spins and goes around. We know that. But we don't say, did you see the earth turn this morning? When we could see the sun after we had turned away. That takes too many words. So we'll say sunset, sunrise. We know the sun's not doing the moving. We are. Here, we even talk about the four cardinal directions, north, south, east, and west. We don't believe there's an edge there. So don't let atheists pull that on you. God uses language the way we use language, colloquially, with synecdoche, hyperbole. I'm aware some of you don't know what those words are. Just he uses it the way we use it. So don't get too fooled. Now learn this lesson from the fig tree. Remember the fig tree? That was a week or so ago. Christ saw a fig tree. He was hungry, but there were no figs on it. He cursed it. The next day they come by. Fig tree's dead. And they go, whoa, what does this mean? Okay, now he's going to tell you. As soon as its twigs get tender and its leaves come out, you know summer's near. And even so, when you see these things happening, you'll know that it is near, right at the door. Watch nature, and you know nature. the fig tree should have had figs on it. The fig tree without figs on it's not worth anything, so it was cursed and died. However, whenever fig trees come in bloom and the leaves are around, any trees, we get excited. If you like spring and summer, if you like winter, you're just completely wrong. I'm sorry. But if you like the greeny, I know some people love winter sports. Winter is when I stay inside. You see the spring and the summer and you see the leaves come out. I get very excited about that. He's saying, watch for the signs. Now, watch for the signs. What signs? Just keep your eyes open. Do you remember he had said a long time ago for us to pray? No, wait a minute. He didn't. He said, watch and pray. My son was in the Marine Corps. While he's out of it, you know that once a Marine, always a Marine. And he and I text back and forth about things we see in politics, things we see in our lives and our culture. And every so often, one of us will text the other one and say, keep your head on a swivel, pray with your eyes open. And it's not because we're paranoid, because we're not. We're actually stunningly optimistic. But we're realist. We see things coming. Okay. I'll talk about this in a sermon, so if you've been listening to our sermons, you may have heard about this already. I talked to one of our members who's on death row in Louisiana. He says he didn't do the crime. Do I know? No, but he's a good guy. He's been in prison now for almost all of his life, for decades, and he doesn't break any rules. He is Christian to the core, and amazing. Well, the administration down there has now restarted the death penalty and has devised 3 different ways, laws passed recently, as I'm recording this, to take their lives and to deny parole to the lifers. And it's, really cracking down. And we have over 60 members in that one facility, and they're a little afraid. So I talked to this man yesterday, and I said, how you doing? And he just laughed. He goes, I'm doing fine. And I said, you know what's happening? And he said, yeah. He said, you can't threaten me with heaven. I just stopped. I went, brother, I'm not going to use the name. Brother, tell me a little bit more about that. He said, you put me on the moon, I'm free. You put me on a cell, I'm free. You put me in a chair, I'm free. You put me outside, I'm free. I'm free in Christ. I'm going to heaven. They may have the facts, but I got the truth. And I asked him, what is he doing to prepare himself for what may come down? And he said, I got permission from the warden that we're going to meet every week and have intercessory prayer. Wow. When you call prisoners, you'll find out a lot of times that if they've had a true conversion experience, and these have, decades, not even one write-up, you can't turn around in a prison without getting a write-up. And they hold to God and hold to their faith, you come away encouraged. In fact, one time, this same brother preached me a sermon because he heard in my voice I was tired. I was a little worn down. And he said, let me just talk. And he, for about 20 minutes, preached a sermon until the prison cut us off because they only get a certain amount of time. So again, we see it, but we see it coming. We see danger. We have entered a post-Christian world. Doesn't scare me. If the world gets darker, shine brighter. That's our job. Truly, I tell you, this generation will not pass away until all these things have happened. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. This generation. Now, you can play with that all you want to, but talking about Israel, he's saying this is going to happen. It's going to happen fast. But then he again switches and makes it very plain. But about that day or hour, no one knows. Not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, only the Father. Jesus didn't even know when the end of the world was going to be. And we've got preachers for the last 2,000 years telling you that they do. Do you remember back in 1988? A NASA engineer, former. Always look for the former and ask yourself why. NASA engineer, here, I think it was 88 reasons why Jesus is coming back in September of 88. For those of you that didn't really pay attention, he didn't. Jehovah's Witnesses claimed he was coming back in early 1900s. They built him a house. Judge Rutherford moved in. Somebody's got to keep it up, right, for Jesus. And they even put out a book, Millions Now Living Shall Never Die. And that was put out back in the 19s, 10s, 15s? Judge Rutherford died too. They don't put out that book anymore. If you've got one, hold on to it. It is everybody, the Seventh-day Adventist, everybody who said, here he comes, has been wrong for 2,000 years. And yet somebody's got a feeling that this time they got it right. You know, don't worry about the end of the world. Be concerned about the end of you, that you're going to end it facing Jesus. You won't have answered all the questions. You won't have conquered all the mountains. You won't know all things, and you have certainly not believed and done all things, because you're human. If you could do all that on your own, you wouldn't need a Savior. But you're asking, seeking, knocking. You're facing Jesus when you die. The end of you, that's the concern. Let's not worry about the end of a nation or the end of the world. Let's deal about the end of ourselves and those we can touch with the grace of God. This generation's going to pass. He goes, not even the Father. Let me talk about that a little bit. What date will be at the end of the world? So many people go to Daniel and try to play around with the 7 sevens and the 3.5s and the... What are the odds you get it right when all of those hundreds of other people who wrote books about it and built churches around it and movements around it were wrong? What are the odds? And you got a feeling, a dream, something? God talked to you, didn't want to talk to them? That makes no sense. Perhaps it's not a date. Think about this. I don't think it's a date for the end of this era. I don't. So what is Jesus talking about? Well, think of it this way. I had 2 children, now both grown, magnificent people. I look up to them. They are amazing. But when they were younger, they would say things like, when can I start driving lessons? Or when can I date? And my answer wasn't August 10th, 2000. No, because it wasn't a date certain. It was a set of circumstances. When I see you're ready to start driving, when I see that you're responsible enough to hand you 2 tons of car and a key, then you can do this. And by the way, that's not a put-off thing. We really believed in if they had shown responsibility, give them responsibility. And so we were very happy for them to drive. But we couldn't tell them to date. And when am I ready to date? You know, not in a big group, just me and a girl or me and a boy. I don't know. But I can tell you that normally it doesn't start until around this time. But the date is when I see that you're able and ready, trustworthy, and that you know enough to protect yourself and others. I don't think there's a date. I think there's a set of circumstances. And that's the day and hour the Father says, now. Think about that. We got to stop here in just a minute. Heaven and earth will pass away, but this is coming. I was always told it was going to come real soon. And I've been told all my life it's coming real soon. So I've done a lot of reading over this, probably close to 100 books. And that's no exaggeration. I read a lot. And I remember what I read. That's the only talent I've got, people. I can't fix your toaster. I have found that there's not been one generation since the death of Jesus that was not absolutely convinced they were the last generation and they could prove it by the signs they saw. Maybe we should get our heads off of that and get our heads onto loving ourselves, our neighbors, and our God, but not in that order. Think about that. We are going to wrap up that bit, and then we're going to leap into an event in Bethany that I find more than fascinating. But that'll be next week. Thank you for joining us. Please join us again. Subscribe, like, and hit the bell. Why do you have to hit the bell if you subscribe? Because YouTube will not necessarily show you what you subscribe to. They'll show you what they want you to see. But if you hit the bell, you'll just receive a notification every time we put up a video. If you don't want to watch that video, just swipe it away. That's it. Yeah, you don't even have to enable notifications on your phone. But if you do, it'll let you know there are videos waiting if you want to see them. All right? So subscribe, like, hit the bell, and share. We'd love to get up to 4,000 subscribers real soon. All right. God bless you. We'll see you next week.